Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to episode 88 of the Social Media and Politics podcast, bringing you expert insights into how social media is changing the political game. I'm your host, Michael Becerra, political scientist at Lund University. Remember, you can always connect with the show on Twitter at SMNP Podcast or visit us on the web at socialmediaandpolitics.org. All right, y'all. Thanks so much for tuning in. A little bit of shameless self-promo before we get into today's episode, and that is I have a new research article out in the International Journal of Communication that looks at how political campaigns use computer games in the context of European national elections. And you may remember episode 41, where we spoke with James Moulding, who was a lead developer for the game Corbyn Run, used in the 2017 British elections, which was a great inspiration for that paper. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. It's open access, so anyone can read it. But in the course of doing that analysis, I've read a lot about political cartoons and political satire, which leads very well into the topic of today's episode. My guest is Carpe Donktum, a pseudonym for an American citizen who makes memes in support of President Trump. And he's gotten a lot of attention recently because at least two of his memes so far have actually been retweeted by the president. One was a video taking footage from the 2019 State of the Union address that focused specifically on the faces of critics of the president and overlaying that with the REM song, Everybody Hurts. And the second, which is where I got familiar with Carpe Donktum's work, was when the president retweeted the apology video of Joe Biden, where Joe Biden is sort of photoshopped in, coming behind himself and rubbing himself on the shoulders. So these are actually videos, not quite image macros, but I think still fall under this genre of memes. And again, reading a lot about political satire, this seems to be what Carpe Donktum's work is, and is a continuation of a longer evolution from the political cartoon to the digital forms of satire we see today. So in 2004, as the internet was becoming more accessible, you had a popular website called jibjab.com that produced parody videos in the context of the 2004 election between Bush and Kerry. Most notably, there was one called This Land. You can check it out on YouTube, which apropos, in the 2008 election, as social media became more popular and YouTube was used more often, there started being more parody videos being uploaded by citizens onto YouTube. And so what we see now, I think, is an interesting phenomenon where as social media has reached saturation among populations and the photo and editing tools have become more accessible, we have essentially the democratization of the political cartoon or of these political satire videos. And so Carpe Donktum is a stay-at-home dad who got politically activated around the time of the 2016 election and started making memes after being inspired with this sort of meme-making culture on the Donald subreddit. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the differences between those meme cultures and the group organization between the Donald on Reddit and boards like Poll on 4chan and 8chan. We're also going to talk about the videos that were retweeted by the president and the sort of copyright battles that happened afterwards. And all in all, I think it's a super fascinating interview. I know not all the listeners are necessarily supporters of Donald Trump, but I think if you step back and look at this as a form of satire that has a long historical precedent, I think it's just an interesting phenomenon where, again, we see this democratization of political satire where you don't have to be a professionally employed cartoonist in order to make a political point and reach a large audience. So an interesting way that social media is changing political expression. And I'm going to put links to the memes that we discuss in the show notes. So if you're not driving or riding a bike, feel free to check those out so you have a little bit of context going into the interview. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Carpe Donktum. Carpe Donktum, thanks for taking the time out and welcome to the Social Media and Politics podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So I've got a ton of questions about your recent memes, which have gone viral and gotten a lot of attention, both on social media and traditional media. But first, I'm curious to hear how you got started making memes in the first place. Did you have some kind of background in content marketing or anything like that? Or was it just a hobby you picked up?
No, I don't really have any background in really anything. The way that I started out was, kind of being a troll on the internet, first of all, for many years. And then creating images where I really got my start. And then I expanded into editing videos. And that was mostly just self-taught. And I tried to, I spent a lot of time watching movies and kind of watching how movies are made and, the look and the feel that directors go for. And then I kind of tried to put that into short edited films.
Gotcha. And when you say a troll on the internet, how do you kind of self-describe that? I think it's an interesting way. I think one of the media outlets had put you on that next to some other figures that were going to the White House recently.
Right. CNN had me, they had a lineup of kind of key known figures that would be there. And they put it just kind of a standard. Someone compared it to the character that's not unlocked yet on Madden or on a video game.
Right, like Mortal Kombat or something.
Yeah, so it's just kind of that blank avatar, and then they said Carpe Donktum, anonymous troll was my official title, I guess.
And so, yeah, how do you, if you say you kind of started out as a troll, I mean, what does that entail in terms of online activity?
Well, I mean, you can define it as lots of different things, but in the late '90s to 2005 or so, I played a lot of Yahoo Spades. So that was just fun for me, was to go get on to Yahoo and play card games, but then also there's a lot of trolling that happens there because each little room that you go into is kind of its own little world. And there are people that always go to the same rooms, and there's people that play a lot. And so there's just a lot of trolling that goes on between those type of people. And I mean, I think that's where I kind of cut my teeth as far as, being able to dish it out and also take it when people say mean things to you on the internet. And, I guess that's kind of how I would describe being a troll.
That's an interesting start. Yahoo Spates, I think maybe a bit before my time, but you had mentioned in one of your previous interviews that especially the meme creation started out in the Donald subreddit on Reddit. And I was wondering if you could describe a bit of the scene on Reddit back then, because I'm curious as to why the meme sharing culture is particularly strong among Trump supporters and why it really took off in that space.
Well, I don't think that meme culture necessarily developed there. I mean, it's developed all over the internet since the internet began. Trolling and memes have been popular. Social media has made it even more popular because it's so easy to share. But some of the first things that really went viral on the internet were just memes from wherever they came from. But as far as the politics goes, the Donald was really and still is just a place where a lot of Trump supporters gathered. And the thing that's a little bit unique about it is that the Donald is solely devoted to positive messages for the president. And there are like 4 or 5 other subreddits that are part of the Donald, but those are the ones that are reserved for what do we think about this policy? Should we support this policy or not? But on the Donald, everything is pro-Trump. It's basically just a 24-hour Trump rally.
Right.
And so there's not, people get banned from the Donald all the time just because they don't agree with the president, because that's not the proper place for it. If they disagree with a policy or a position, there's other outlets within the Donald and other subreddits where they can voice that. And because of that, the memes that are created at the Donald, I think they just get better because of that, because there's a lot of collaboration and people build off of what other people do. And the positive atmosphere just creates more people that want to make that same type of stuff. A lot of times I think that all the negativity that gets put into memes sometimes stops people from actually creating their own, just because they don't want to be associated with, the very negative stuff. Like stuff I see from the left is often very either violent, sexually explicit, homophobic, just anything that you can. They're all very, very negative memes. They're very rarely just poking fun. It's really we want to destroy this person type of communication.
Because I wanted to ask you about, and I mean, this has been in the news recently with these mass shootings, is the anonymous boards like 4chan and 8chan, which also have this meme sharing culture, I guess not particularly in support of Donald Trump. It could be about anything. And I was curious if you had also kind of been in those spaces and if you see any similarities and differences between those anonymous boards and the Donald subreddit.
Well, so 4chan, I don't so much anymore because I think I kind of grew out of it, but I used to kind of hang out in 4chan boards specifically like the random board, which is /B,
Right.
and then /poll was another one that I hung out in. I didn't really get into. There's a ton of like anime and just everything you can think of kind of boards on 4chan, but those never really interested me. I think I kind of grew out of it because a lot of the stuff on, at least on /B, is, it's either just really gross or just being shocking to be shocking. I mean, you don't get a lot of good stuff out of there. I mean, there are some memes that come out of there, and there's actually some really good memes that come out of there, but generally, it's not really a place that I hang out anymore. I think it's only fed on itself to make it even worse than it was in like 2005 when I was hanging out in there.
Because I think it's interesting. So what you're saying is that in the Donald, it's more of everyone's kind of for Trump, and then they're working together.
Right.
Maybe the 4chan stuff, 8chan is a bit too all over the place.
Yeah, on 8chan, everybody is doing whatever they're doing. /poll has become, I would say, pretty pro-Trump in a lot of ways. There's a lot of support that is in there. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to parse that, because a lot of what happens on 4chan boards is people rebelling against the prevalent culture. And right now, Trump is really the counterculture. In the 90s and in the 80s, the left was the counterculture, but they've taken over so much of popular media and Hollywood and everything like that they've really become the standard culture. So now when 4chan wants to go rebel against the culture and become the counterculture, they have to go to the right to do it.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, but do you notice I'm curious because I've dabbled around in 4chan and 8chan just to see what's going on there. We've talked about it on the show as well. And I mean, do you notice any similarities kind of in like there's a certain way of speaking on those forums, right? There's a certain lingo.
Right.
And do you notice that kind of trending up into the Donald, or is there other, imagine maybe some memes developed there go into the subreddit.
Well,
or is it generally kind of different norms?
I would say there's a pretty big difference just because there is an inherent, it's not a camaraderie type of thing between 4chan and like people on Reddit. There's actually, between 4chan and Reddit, the people from 4chan severely look down upon people from Reddit. Like they would refer to people that are on Reddit as, they're not as smart as them. They're the whole Pepe the Frog stuff, right? So there's Pepe the Frog, and then there is another version of the frog, which is sort of like the mentally handicapped brother frog. That is who they think people on Reddit are. They're Pepe's mentally challenged little brother that is always getting into things and thinks that they're really smart, but they're not really smart. That's who they would think that people on Reddit are. And people on Reddit would say the same thing about 4chan, is that, oh, they're just dumb. So there's really not a lot of crossover there. You're either a Reddit person or you're a 4chan guy or whatever, but the crossover is pretty limited. And on 4chan, the lingo tends to be a lot more controversial just in every way, shape, and form. I mean, the standard greeting and things like that from like 2005 was, hey, I'm a new fag, or hey, I'm an old fag. And like, so
right.
Those type of things don't happen like on the Donald. Maybe here and there somebody from 4chan will post on the Donald, but that's not the type of lingo that gets used there.
Huh. Yeah, it's interesting. I was just curious to get your take on that, to see, to what extent are they kind of working together or different, but I think it's some interesting perspectives. So kind of keeping on these early days, I guess, quote unquote early days, but I'm thinking around the election or when you started making memes, what kind of software were you using and what were you making memes of?
So originally, when I first started kind of transitioning over from just images, I was using GIMP, which is basically free Photoshop.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't really aware of what other people were using. So I found like a plugin for it that allowed you to edit video and then kind of re-splice it all together. So actually the first video that I ever did was done frame by frame in free Photoshop. And then
in GIMP,
yeah. And then
which is impressive. I've used GIMP and that is difficult to learn.
It was a little rough. So that Maestro video with Trump's head on Bugs Bunny, that was done frame by frame in GIMP, and then reassembled at the end. But after that, I looked into better software, and I've used After Effects ever since.
Right, Adobe After Effects.
Hmm.
Also tough to learn.
It's not too bad. There's a ton of YouTube tutorials out there.
Gotcha. And so this one you created frame by frame, was that the one that won the InfoWars prize?
No,
Different.
I have absolutely no idea who won the InfoWars prize. There were two or three videos that were the popular ones, and none of them actually won the prize. I'm not sure who did nobody ever found out who won the original prize.
Because I had been reading some articles about your work, and they said that you had won it.
Well, I have won the second InfoWars prize. The original InfoWars prize was in 2017, and it was right around the time of the wrestling GIF, the CNN getting tackled by Trump.
Right.
When that went viral, there was a $10,000 prize, and the one that won it was a Matrix video. But then in 2018, they had another prize, and that was for the NPC meme. And I did win that one. So.
Okay. And I'll link to all these in the show notes. Our listeners can go and check them out. But so this first one where you're going frame by frame, like how long would that take?
Well, so I actually started it before the contest was even a thing.
Right.
I had started it probably in early June or something like that. And then I think it probably took me 3 weeks or something like that. And then right around the time that I had released it, I think a week before the contest was announced, I had finished it, but it didn't have the CNN logo. It was just the singer up there. And so then when the contest came out, I went back over it and made everything as pretty as I could and put the CNN stuff on there and then put it out. But I think it probably took me about a month total.
Interesting. So when you're making these, I don't know if it's the same from back then to now, how are you using other platforms to promote them, like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube? I mean, I've noticed you have a lot of different social media accounts. Do you use them differently, or do you kind of just push all the same content across the different platforms?
So I'm somebody who probably needs to hire a social media manager at some point, like just to keep track of everything. I have an account on every platform that's out there, but really the only thing that I use is Twitter and YouTube, and then Instagram. So Instagram limits you to 60 seconds. So any video any meme that I make that's less than 60 seconds, I will post on Instagram, but I'm not going to post like the video in like 2 separate posts.
Right.
I probably should do that, but I don't. So I always put it up on Twitter, and I always put it up on YouTube. But then the other platforms are just, if I get to it, if I think about it, I'll put them on Facebook often, but very rarely do they do that well on Facebook. It just seems like they don't get any traction. Even though I've got like 20-some thousand followers, I guess, on Facebook, they don't seem to really go anywhere.
Yeah, I think we've heard that from some other content publishers as well, just with the algorithm changes and pay to promote and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the way that the Facebook platform works as well as I do the other ones. So I could venture a guess of why my content doesn't go. I've had stuff go viral on Facebook before, but it's very few and far between. And doesn't seem to be any real logic to it. Just seems like something gets picked up every once in a while and then it'll go crazy. But Facebook is probably one of my least favorite platforms because I just don't like the way that the thing is set up. Settings are in 15 different places, and searching for things is no two searches are the same. Like you go and search for something and then you can find it right away. And then the next time you search for it, you can't find it no matter how long you look for it. It's just, the whole thing is just chaotic. And then the marketplace adds a whole nother element of stupid to the platform.
I want to ask you about a couple of the memes that the president retweeted. But first, you mentioned the kind of WrestleMania CNN GIF that went viral. And in their New York Times interview, you were saying that was kind of a turning point for the Donald subreddit. I'm wondering if you kind of explain what that meant and kind of maybe how it affected your work after that kind of exploded.
Well, so it's kind of a two-part story because like there were videos and there were images and things like that that were popular on the Donald before. And, I had made some images that got a bunch of upvotes and things like that on the Donald before that. But after the wrestling GIF thing, there was a lot of people that got involved, mainly because of CNN going after the guy just because he, posted a video. So I think that really motivated a lot of people. Most of the people that I call friends now that are kind of in the same circle of making meme videos and things like that, they all got their start either from the CNN blackmail thing or shortly after. So I think it just really motivated people. They're like, first of all, it was really funny. And then second of all, it just got people kind of involved because clearly it just triggered the hell out of CNN. And, as a troll, that's always what you want to go for. Maximum triggered.
You're saying that the backlash from CNN then motivated people more.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. I want to return to that because I know you've had some issues with the media recently. But I want to talk about your first meme that got retweeted by the president, which, as I understand it, was the State of the Union meme you made this year.
Right. Yeah, it was in February, I believe.
And so so I went back and watched it. That was clips from the State of the Union, especially honing in on notable Democratic figures,
right,
with a certain REM song behind it. It slips my mind. I wasn't a big REM fan.
Everybody hurts.
Everybody hurts. Right. Exactly. So you have this meme, which, to be honest, I thought was quite, I don't know the right word is, like, quite unoffensive.
Yeah, it wasn't offensive at all.
It was actual footage spliced with an REM song.
Right.
And, quite humorous at that. But, can you describe a bit what happened there in terms of Trump tweets it, I guess your phone explodes, but then the media reaction was quite bad as well. So can you kind of walk us through that process?
Well, so I'll start with the reaction from the media. The reaction from the media was instantly bad, but it wasn't nearly as bad as like the wrestling thing. And there was a couple reasons for that, and I'll get into that in a minute. But the way that it happened was I made the video, I think, on the 5th or the 6th, and then it got tweeted by the president. I think it was on the 16th. So there was a good 10 days between the State of the Union and when it was actually tweeted by him. But immediately, like you said, my phone exploded, and everybody was like, "Oh my God!" But what happened was, I think that a lot of the mainstream media kind of learned their lesson from the several other times that they'd absolutely freaked out about a video. And CNN was largely silent. MSNBC was largely silent. But behind the scenes, the major media corporations that actually own, like production companies, the person that owns the rights to the REM song had the video taken down for copyright reasons. So it was only up for, I believe, maybe 7 to 8 hours before it was taken down. So that cut off a lot of the oxygen. I think had it been on there longer, the media would have had a bigger reaction to it. I mean, they had a decent enough reaction to it just in the 8 hours it was up, but that stifled it a little bit. And then I put Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA on the same video, and Trump tweeted that one. And then that one got taken down in about 8 hours. So the whole thing was actually less of a media like firestorm than the wrestling one. And it was just because, they teamed up with the copyright holders to get it taken down right away.
Right.
Lawyers got involved and all that.
Which is interesting because, I mean, there's, you can go on YouTube and, search pretty much any song and you'll find some version of it out there. So was this was them kind of flexing a bit,
right?
To maybe expedite that process to get it taken down.
Right. Well, I think the Streisand effect. The Streisand effect is when you talk about something and try and shut people up, then it makes people talk louder and it makes things even more viral. But I think all of this is, at least on Twitter, is generally going towards the new way to silence content that you don't like is to go report it for copyright.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that's being targeted is that the way that Twitter works as far as copyright goes is it's not the same way that YouTube works. YouTube will allow you to keep up copyrighted content as long as they're awarding your ad revenue to the proper people. They'll say, yeah, you can use Universal's video or whatever as long as they're getting the ad revenue from it. Twitter just says somebody's claimed this content, we're taking it down. And what's so messed up about it is that the only recourse for the user is to contact the copyright holder directly and give them a bunch of personal information about themselves. So just for example, I've had, I think, six or seven videos taken down over the last couple months. And it's all from companies originating in the UK that own a bunch of rights to songs. And the only way to appeal the decision is to send them your driver's license, your social security number, your home address, your name, phone number, all that kind of stuff. You have to send it to somebody you don't know across the ocean before they'll even consider it. And even then, they are the ones that have to release and say, this is a valid appeal. So Twitter just completely takes themselves out of the picture. And if you file a copyright, then the video will be taken down. Basically, no questions asked. And there's no recourse. And if I post the video again after it's been taken down, then Twitter can ban me for terms of service violation.
Gotcha. So it's a bit more, a bit more high stakes.
It's a high stakes game, and it's very effective for silencing content that you don't like.
So let's move to the Joe Biden apology meme, which. So for the listeners who haven't seen it, again, it'll be in the show notes. Joe Biden issued an apology video where you basically created Joe Biden coming behind himself and rubbing himself on the shoulders as he was apologizing.
Right.
And so when I saw this meme, I laughed. I thought it was hilarious. And I know that one was a bit controversial, but thinking about it, it was super ironic. It was great timing. It was produced very fast, and it poked fun at a serious situation, which I think are all hallmarks of political satire, right? Like we might see this in a political cartoon, but I think that one was a bit more controversial, and then maybe didn't have any copyright violations. So how does that one compare to the State of the Union meme?
Well, so going back to the State of the Union, so that one was up for like 8 hours, and I think it would have created a lot more controversy than you saw had it been up for longer. But the Biden meme, as you said, it was political satire, and it was something you would see on SNL if SNL was still good. Like I think they're terrible at this point, but like that's the kind of stuff that SNL would do. Of
right. The
presidential candidate apologizes for something, and while he's doing the exact same thing that he's apologizing for, that would be something that SNL should run with. And what was so controversial about it was that it was something that the left really didn't want to address about him. It's something that's the sniffing meme with Joe Biden has been around for years and years because he does weird, kind of creepy things at different times. Not all the time, but sometimes.
Right.
And it was just always something you could never talk about. And then when President Trump tweeted it, then everyone was forced to talk about it. And that made a lot of people very uncomfortable, which also made them very mad. So,
and I mean, because that one didn't have any music that could be copyrighted, right? So did that one stay up?
That one's still up. Yeah. Okay. I think that also made them mad too, that they couldn't force the only way they could get it to be taken down was to make enough noise that Trump decided to take it down, and they weren't able to make enough noise. And I think that really bothered them. And they also couldn't get to me. I mean, there's a lot of threats from people around that time about, we'll come find you, or, all that kind of crazy stuff. And I'm just like, I don't care. So the last time they were able to at least get like the guy that made the wrestling one, they forced him to like never make a video again. Otherwise they were going to expose where he lived and all that kind of stuff. So they did not find that was something they could do to me.
Gotcha. So if we take these two examples, because just these are notable because the president tweeted about them. I mean, what's your thought process kind of from conception to publishing? Like what makes you or inspires you, I guess, to make this State of the Union meme or the Biden meme? I mean, do you kind of sit and brainstorm for a while, or do you just have the idea and you get to it? I mean, what's your thought process behind it?
Well, everyone is a little bit different, so it just depends on what the content is and kind of what's going on. Because sometimes there are some videos that I spend 3 or 4 days working on, and they're not necessarily about one topic that's in the news. Maybe it's a general overarching topic, but it's not tied to one news story. But then there's things that just pop up, like the State of the Union or the Joe Biden apology, which I'll do. It might take me 5 hours to do or something. So each one I kind of approach it differently. If I'm making like a serious investment of work, then there's more planning and thought that goes into it. But when I'm doing something that's very topical, speed is the most important, because whatever the issue is, it might only be relevant for one news cycle, 2 news cycles. If you don't get it out first or get it out soon, then you've missed your chance. You can't come back to it 3 weeks later and be like, oh, haha, look at this funny video, and people are like, what are you even talking about? It was like a year ago.
Right.
So the process is always, what do I think is funny? What grabs me about any particular situation? And then trying to put my thoughts and my political vantage point into the video in a way that it still makes it funny, but there's a point to it as well.
Gotcha. And then when you're mentioning, getting it out in terms of speed, I mean, how do you actually have it put in a position that the president can actually retweet it? I'm assuming Twitter is the best platform for that because it doesn't have these, filters that Facebook does, for example. So, I mean, there's a kind of like one-hit wonder aspect with the State of the Union, but then, there's been a couple that have been retweeted. So how do you get that out there to be exposed?
Well, over the last 2 years or so, I've kind of built up a network of other, personalities and people within the Trump universe and the left universe, even just all of the political realm on Twitter. And so really that network is what gives me that access, because I can't just text Trump and say, hey, I got a new video out, you should tweet it.
Right.
But I don't have to spend all day tagging and retagging Trump. I just put stuff out, and I know that I have maybe 150 kind of big name people that are 1 degree of separation from Trump, and then I've got maybe 10 people that are 1 degree of separation from Trump. And if those people share, it can be seen.
Gotcha.
So Trump doesn't have to follow me, but if 30 people retweet it that are followed by 5 people that Trump actually follows, and one of them retweets it, then if Don Jr. retweets it, it's probably got a 1 in 8 chance of being retweeted by Trump himself, something like that.
Gotcha. So moving from these 2 memes, I want to discuss one more, which was the one with Jim Acosta in the kind of Wild West saloon.
Yeah.
And that one, I think we're kind of going on a bit more trajectory of kind of harmless to a little bit more edgy. Which again, this one, it was also cartoonish, right? There's not explicit kind of violence in the meme. At the same time, though, there is an implication, right? It's a Wild West shootout.
Right.
And so I'm wondering, what would you say to critics? Well, first of all, I guess, why'd you make the meme? And then what would you say to critics that are saying this is, either implicating violence against journalism or it's trying to undermine trust in democracy? I mean, how do you deal with those criticisms?
Well, all right. So first, let me accurately, to the best of my knowledge, describe the
yeah, please do.
The video. The video in question is it's a spaghetti western. It's taken from the film Trinity. It's one of the Trinity films. It's a spaghetti western. The actual movie itself is a comedy. Everything about it is a comedy. It's an Old West comedy. And the scene that was offensive to people on the left was a scene where President Trump comedically slaps Jim Acosta in the face and does this kind of gun twirl thing where he's drawing on him really fast, and Jim Acosta is surprised at how fast he is and all this kind of stuff. And then there's a scene at the very end where Jim Acosta is leaving the saloon, and he turns around to shoot Trump in the back, and Trump shoots the gun out of his hand and he runs off. So what was claimed by people on the left was that, number one, that it was just a violent meme throughout. It was just violence and things like that. And then at the end, Trump shot him. So number one, I don't do violence or graphic violence or any sort of real violence other than slapstick type of things like that. So that was never my intention, and I don't think anybody watching it would ever get that. I mean, if they're actually watching it, I don't think they would actually get that feel from it. It's meant to be funny. And what I guess what I would say to people that can't see that is, like, where did your sense of humor go on things like that? Like, why does slapstick become some sort of like dangerous thing now, just because it's against your political leanings? And I think that's a bad place to start heading to, where things can only be funny if they align with you perfectly politically.
Right. Because you alluded to it a bit, saying like you don't do violence. I'm curious about, like, have you thought about ethics, and like, is there a line you wouldn't cross? So maybe that's one. I'm thinking about, this concern about deep fakes and manipulated videos. I mean, is that something that you absolutely would engage with, you have a problem with, or is it kind of, where do you draw the line in making your memes?
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack in there, but I think I can wrap my head around the whole question. But personally, I don't create videos where a specific person is targeted with violence. Even slapstick, most of the time I try and stay away from it. I would say that out of all the videos I've ever done, the Acosta one was probably the edgiest and closest to the line, my own personal line. But I try to stay away from targeting individuals and putting them in violent situations or things like that, or sexual situations, or anything that would not be rated G. Basically, I want every meme that I make to be shareable by a wide variety of people. And as far as the deep fakes go, my intention is never to deceive people. So oftentimes, like, right after the Joe Biden video, CNN and MSNBC were calling it a doctored video. And the connotation of doctored video means that I was trying to deceive people.
Right.
They won't call it just a meme. That's because that's what it is. But they call it a doctored video so that they can add the connotation of, well, there's something sneaky going on here. Like I'm trying to convince people that there are actually two Joe Bidens, and one of them was massaging himself on camera. Like, that is never something that I want to be doing. I'm not trying to sell you a false reality. I'm not trying to make people think something is real when it's not. So the deep fakes thing, the only time I would ever use the deep fake software would be if I'm making a situation where it's clear that it's a funny video. Like, I don't know if you recently saw, but somebody used the deep fake software to add Trump's face onto Rick Astley as he's singing "Never Gonna Give You Up."
Yes, have seen that.
Like in his video. So you've seen that. So that is one where no one would ever believe that just happened. But if I was to use that software to put it into, I don't know, something where Trump was saying something like extremely racist, or someone else was saying something extremely racist, that would be a line that I would never want to cross, because I don't want to give the impression that something is reality when it's not.
Yeah, that's interesting.
There's an example of that as well, that I got kind of hit on this, but I made a video about Joe Biden probably a month or two ago where I spliced a couple different parts of the same speech together, and I in between the two parts of it, I had someone walk in front of the the camera so that it looked like it was all one scene.
Yeah, transition.
Yeah, there was a transition between the two clips. And people accuse me of trying to sell it as real, but I slowed the video down, or the audio and the video down, so much that no one would ever think that that was actually Joe Biden talking all at once. Like, there was the slowed down Nancy Pelosi video, which arguably was hard to tell between the real and the fake one.
Mm-hmm.
But the one with Joe Biden was, I'm Joe Biden. Like, no one is going to believe that actually happened. So the little transition that I was doing wasn't. It was more of just a technique I was doing just to give the whole scene the right look, instead of trying to deceive people that Joe Biden actually talks as slow as I had him in the video. Like, that's, no one actually believes that,
right?
But people do get mad about it.
Well, it goes to what you were saying about with the Biden meme and the media. You give them the opportunity, I guess, to say that it's a doctored video, right? Like, technically, obviously they're spinning it for a certain reason,
right?
And I think slowing down Joe Biden's voice would give them some, but in the same logic, they could claim deep fake or something like that.
Right.
So I know you've had some, just in the past couple weeks, some sort of backlash where your name was released and things like that. I mean, what sparked that? Was it a meme in particular, or was that kind of an ongoing thing that came out? I mean, what was the story behind that?
Well,
if you want to get into it,
it's fine. What's happened over the last 6 to 8 months is that I've gotten a lot of attention, obviously, and then I've gotten requests for interviews from media outlets and other things, and I've done all of them. I've really done, I think, a good job of being willing to talk to anyone. I'll give CNN a sound bite if they want a sound bite. I'll talk to the Washington Post. I'll talk to New York Times. I'll also talk to all the Republican-leaning sites as well. But in that time, things have ramped up kind of more and more, and kind of all culminating around the White House visit and the social media summit. I think at that point, it was too much. It was too much for them to bear to have me be anonymous. And BuzzFeed was the first one to say that they were going to publish my real name, and then I successfully convinced them that would be a terrible idea. And about 4,000 or 5,000 of my friends convinced them as well. But the next day, then it was Huffington Post, and I believe that I successfully convinced them not to do it as well. But then the reporter that was planning on doing the story just decided that he'd just release it himself. So, but it has been a kind of a point of contention with all of the media for a while of, well, we know who you are, and they make sure to let you know that they know your name. CNN did that. We know who you are, but you don't want us to publish your name. Is that right? And I've just said, no, you can use nobody needs to know my real name, because everyone knows who I am based on my pseudonym. So my face is public, my pseudonym is public, and I can't see any reason why you would need to publish my actual name. You've all run background checks on me and found that I don't have a criminal record or anything like that. So the only reason to publish my name would be to have some sort of backlash coming at me or my family. So that's basically that.
Gotcha. I have two last questions for you. I want to return to that in a second. But the first is, we have a bunch of academics listening, and there's this debate looking at how the internet is used in politics. And it's kind of an old debate, but it was a question of whether, liking, sharing content, subscribing to an event, or donating online, if that was a form of slacktivism, in the sense that it was kind of lazy participation, that it wasn't really influencing the political process. So there's been a question of whether this, using the internet is a form of slacktivism or activism. And I'm curious to get your take about, reflecting on your own work. I mean, do you think that is a genuine form of activism?
Well, I mean, it's a complicated thing, because a lot of what is consumed now comes from the internet. So the amount of people that you reach just through the internet is way higher than it ever has been in history. But on the flip side of that, there's a lot of people that I think people are more closed-minded now than they ever have been. So the people that you reach are likely not going to agree with you unless they already agreed with you. So the amount of activism that you can actually do through the internet is somewhat limited just by how divided politics and thought has become. But it's also hard to weigh that against in real life activism. A lot can be said the same way, that people they're not gonna show up to your event to hear what you have to say unless they already agree with you. So the real activism, there's knocking on doors and there's registering people to vote and things like that. And I really respect people that do that, but you're not moving a lot of hearts and minds with, the Women's March, or any march that you would have is not going to move anybody that already wasn't on your side. So as far as being lazy, sure, some of it's a little bit lazy because, I could be going out and getting donations for the poor and the sick and the homeless and all of those things. But I can actually do that more effectively online than I can walking around my neighborhood. I can get, as far as money raising goes, as far as helping people in the community and things like that. I think those still need to be done kind of in person. But as far as laziness, there are a lot of keyboard warriors out there that think that tweeting is helping people. And sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's not. So I like to think that at least the stuff that I'm doing and I spend time doing is maybe moving the needle here and there. If I can get people on the left to see something differently and see some humor in a situation that they didn't see it in before, then I think that's an impact that's worth the time.
It's a really interesting take. Now, my last question has to deal with, what's going on in the future. We've got an election coming up. You obviously have a lot of support online, but also, especially with media publishing your name and stuff, a lot of criticism as well. And going back to the CNN WrestleMania meme that you said kind of galvanized supporters to be more active. I mean, have you had the same effect? Are you planning to kind of up the frequency or the content in any way moving into this election cycle?
Well, not really, because generally my process is that I try not to work on projects that I'm not interested in, just because it takes me twice as long and the product is half as good. So I generally like to watch what's going on, and then when something strikes me as funny or something that I can do, then I go and do it. But I find that forced content is never as good. It's never as viral. It's never as real. So I'm not going to just, up it from 6 videos a month to, 12 videos a month, because the 6 ones that I add on there that aren't that funny aren't going to do any good. So I'm going to continue to find things that are funny in the media and make videos about them at my own pace. What I am kind of increasing is the amount of events and things like that I'm going to attend. I've been invited to several events over the next couple months where there will either be speaking at those events or just being there to talk to people and things like that. So I'm doing a little more things in the real world while trying to maintain all the stuff that I have done before that's gotten me here.
Gotcha. Well, I'm sure in due course we'll see another video pop up on Twitter that gets both support and criticism. But but it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. So thanks so much for taking the time out and coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I've just been speaking with Carpe Donktum. And that'll do it for this episode of the Social Media and Politics podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget, you can check the episode description of this show and you'll find links to all the memes we discussed in this episode. Also, don't forget you can follow us on Twitter at SMNP Podcast, like the Facebook page, Social Media and Politics Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Becerra, signing off from Malmo. See you next time.